Fidelity did this huge survey looking at average 401k balances broken down by age. And according to Fidelity, for those that are 30, the average 401k balance is just under about $35,000 a year. By the time that you get to age 35, the average 401k balance in this country is about $59,000 per year. And for the average 40-year-old right now, the average 401k balance is about $91,000 per year. And so the question becomes, if I'm in my 30s, if I might be in that messy middle stage, is that how much I should have, or where should I be, or what should my numbers look like?
It's great that we actually have pulled up and we have a great guidance here, because we shared earlier that when you're 30 years of age, we say it, Fidelity says it, 1 times your earnings is probably a good aspirational goal to shoot for. By the time you enter into becoming a 40-year-old, as you're graduating from 39 to 40, we'd like it to be 3 times your income. There is a transition as your money starts growing and building. So we could actually put numbers if we knew what the median income was for typical workers.
So what you're thinking here is, okay, I got to go from 1 times to 3 times. It seems that's a lot. I got to triple. I got to triple what's going on. So if we know that the median income for someone in the 30s right now is about $86,000, what are those money guy markers? What are those mile markers that we ought to be hitting? Well, remember, we said that the average 30-year-old 401k balance is about $35,000, but we think that your total investable net worth should be closer to $55,000. That was the median income for a 30-year-old. Well, by the time that you get to 35, we think that your total invested assets should be about $146,000. And by the time you end your 30s, you should have an average liquid net worth. Your liquid net worth should be about 3 times your annual income. And if we're just going to use the median income of Americans in their 30s of $85,000, that means that your investment portfolio should be a little over $250,000, right at $257,000. So average Americans are not quite aligning with our financial mutants.
Well, I think people are going to see they're going to immediately yell at the screen, this is where you lost me, because they see us go from $55,000 for a 30-year-old to somehow $257,000 by the time you reach 40. Guys, I'll go and tell you, this is the power of compounding growth. Right. You don't have to do this alone. This is not only you putting the money in there. This is about your army of dollars actually putting some money and growing upon itself over time. We have a great case study or example to show you this might be a lot easier, so that you're not stuck like the typical American, avoiding and sticking your head in the sand. You're actually getting in there, getting the money working, and letting your compounding army of dollar bills do all the heavy lift as well.
Yeah, if you think about that, nearly $55,000 that you would have had at the end of your 20s, if you just let that grow at 8.5% without adding another dollar to it, just letting those dollars grow, it would grow from $55,000 at age 30 all the way to $128,000 by age 40. What you've done is you are halfway to where you're supposed to. Just the dollars that you saved in your 20s got you halfway there. That means that you would only need to have about a 10% savings rate in order to save that additional 50%. Now, we're not suggesting that you drop your savings rate. What we are showing is that if you do the hard work early on and you let your army of dollar bills start working for you, the path gets easier and easier and easier. Now, likely in your 30s, we talk about it all the time, this is the messy middle. This is when life begins to pull you in 1,000 different directions. That's why we want you shooting for 25%. But if you did what you were supposed to do before you got to the messy middle, there's a good chance that you're going to have freedom and flexibility to navigate the messy middle different than your peers.
But we've looked into the data, and the research shows that the typical American doesn't start saving and investing until age 33.
That's right.
So we've just shown you, if you could come into this whole investment at age 30 with this sum of money, it has the chance to double upon itself over the decade. This is not going to get easier if you stick your head in the sand and defer this. I would encourage you, if you're like the typical American and you're 33 years of age, you're just now discovering this, you can still do it. Your compounding opportunity is massive, but it's not going to get easier. Every day you delay, this is going to get harder and harder. So make sure you start putting money to work. Go beyond the American 9%. Let's get it up to the 25% that we talk about all the time on the Money Guy Show. There's a reason we want to help you reach your success.
So what are the things that we ought to focus on in our 30s? Well, the first one is we really ought to focus on optimizing. And one of the number one most powerful, most impactful, most important things that you can optimize in your 30s is actually reaching that 25% savings rate. Maybe you don't start there at 30. Maybe you're only at 15%. Maybe you're only at 18%. But if you can focus on the optimization and focus on getting to 25% as quickly as you can, you will be amazed at how powerful those dollars can be for you.
It's also important. This is the age you've probably gotten a few promotions. Your income's going up. We shared in the 20s that this is where, you might be in a lower tax bracket. It makes sense for Roth. Don't sleep on the fact that you probably need to reassess the Roth versus traditional IRAs. Your income tax rates go up as your earnings go up. Make sure you're staying on top of all that.
And then the third thing that we want you to focus on, and this is specifically as it relates to your 401k, is we want you to understand your vesting schedule. Now, there's a good chance a lot of people change jobs in their 20s, and even in your early 30s, there's a chance that you still might change jobs, change career paths, but you've likely been working and building, and you've likely got some dollars that your employer has put into your 401k on your behalf. And you want to make sure before you make a job change, you weigh the costs, the all-in costs of making that decision. And one of the things that employers are able to do in order to incentivize you to stay with them is they can add a vesting schedule to contributions that they put into the plan, which means that it might not all be yours day one. There are a few different types of vesting schedules that we see. Now, Brian, you mentioned earlier, you talked about safe harbor contributions. These are contributions that the employer puts in automatically, oftentimes, whether you put money in or don't put money in. Most of the time, these are 100% vested. Now, not every time. You'll want to check your plan document because these can have a vesting schedule over a certain amount of time. But most often, these contributions are 100% vested.
So that's important. Pay attention. You'll like the word safe harbor. The next thing is cliff investing. This means that you basically go from 0% to 100%, but over a certain period of time, and it's a shorter period of time. That's why people will do cliff vesting if they, after 2 years, you go from 0 to 100%. But what's more popular is what's called graded investing, and this is where you'll see every year you pick up an additional 20% more vesting. So typically after 5 years of being there, in 6 years you're fully vested in the funding from your employer. Understand this verbiage, understand how this impacts you, because it's going to be very important to know how much money you get to keep, but also your career and employment decisions to see if you don't make a bad decision in that decision matrix.
Yeah, when you change jobs, there are other costs associated than just the salary that you're losing. So you want to make sure, again, you measure twice, cut once when it comes to making those decisions. All right, so now let's talk about the 40s, Brian.
Yeah, 40s are important because this is, if you're either going to be bitter because you've missed out on what compounding growth, or this is going to be where you start celebrating that your money is starting to grow upon itself exponentially easier, making the work less hard for you in the future.